Hold on.
But this is like
4, 3, 2, 1.
Now call back into session the January regular meeting of the City of High Point Planning and Zoning Commission. I will ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call vote of the commissioners that are in attendance this evening.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer present. Mr. Uzak?
Present.
Mr. Kirkman?
Present.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Morgan?
Present.
Ms. Swift? Mr. Venable?
Present.
Mr. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Wheatley?
Present.
You have 8 members in attendance.
Very well. 8 members. We do have a quorum. This is a continuation of the January 26th meeting. We recessed on Tuesday night and are resuming this evening. I want to acknowledge for the record that additional public comments have been received related to zoning map amendment. They've been made available to all the commissioners who have taken them under advisement. Just so people will know, members of the public will know that their comments were received. I want to read the names. Denise Shelton, Andrew Frazee, Roger Bates, Barbara Rossetti, Carol Farrell, Griska Coronel, Todd Smolko, Rob Frick, and Nancy Purdy. Commission is now going to deliberate and formulate its recommendations on all the items heard on Tuesday evening. Because this is a remote meeting, commission members will need to signal the chair. The chair will recognize them, and they can then make their comments, motions, and seconds. Also, all votes made tonight will be by roll call. The first item that we're going to rejoin this evening was Winfield Property Zoning Map Amendment 2024. There has been a slight change that the developer has requested. Mr. Shannon from the city will address that now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning Department. After the developer had a chance to consult with the City of High Point Transportation Department, and they are requesting that condition 2, Roman number 2, C3 regarding pedestrian access be removed. That issue regarding pedestrian access and sidewalks will be addressed at TRC per the requirements of the development ordinance. So there does not need to be a zoning condition. And you have that updated conditional zoning ordinance in front of you. One other item, just to note for you, I received several phone calls about I believe the email received from Barbara, is that Rizzotti?
Rizzotti, yes.
Several people who had signed that petition wanted to make sure that was part of the record. Just for those members of the public who are listening, yes, that petition where those people had signed is part of the comments that the board has received.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Shannon? Chair recognizes Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Shannon, why on some of these public comments, there's no address provided?
I do not have an answer to that.
I can respond to that. Sometimes in an email, the person does not provide their address. We provided the information that was available.
Okay, the only reason I asked the question is because we wanted to make sure it was somebody that lived in the area within and not somebody just sent it in. So that's the only question I had.
Very good. Anything else for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. I assume all the commissioners have a chance to look over the public comments we've received since Tuesday evening. Did everybody get those in their package? So we will discuss this among ourselves this evening. I'm going to start with a comment that I've given this a lot of thought. And, this property, it's a difficult piece of property. And I look at the topography of the stream, which is actually the Deep River, setting some of the property really out of bounds for any sort of development. And with the Wendover corridor plan in place, the only access you have is roughly about 500, I believe that was 500 feet, transportation told us, on Morris Farm Road. And it occurs to me that whether you have one access or 3, I mean, they're all, they're so close to each other. I'm not sure that it's not just a funnel. It all comes back to the same spot. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with seeing that this property is even suitable for an R16 zoning. But I'd very much like to hear arguments from the other commissioners. Chair recognizes Mr. Walsh.
This is really an argument. I studied the property and with the topo of it and the creek and this different. This property is not, personal opinion, is not set for single family with your ins and outs and the way it lays. So you're either going to get a nice set of apartments like this, or someone might come in later and do a different kind of apartment. That's the only thing. I just think if this doesn't go here, that single family is just not a good lay for single family lots. That's not an argument. That's just.
I guess, my comment to that would be, okay, if it doesn't get R16, nothing's going to happen there. We don't necessarily know that, but I don't know that there's any requirement that something has to happen there. Any other commissioners have any comments or thoughts? Chair recognizes Commissioner Swift.
So I've been through there a lot. Family used to live near there, and that road, I have the same concern you have. The only no eds or exits or entrances except right there on Morris Farm, and you've only got 500 feet. You've got to have at least two, so they're all still going to spill out. There's no sidewalks, so there's always people. I don't think I've ever been through there when there's people out walking dogs, pushing baby carriages. There's always people out there walking down Morris Farm. So that would concern me. I noticed one of the comments said it is sort of a blind curve, which is, to some concern, but, there is a lot of people out walking and there's only no other way to get in and out. It's all still going to come out, whether there's two entrances or one right there on Morris Farm. That would be my, I think, biggest concern about it, that there's no other way to get access.
Right. Well, reading the public comment, something occurred to me. And I think that a lot of the members of the public understand that the property most likely will be developed for something at some point. Traffic seems to be their number one concern. And if you did have direct access off Wendover, many of their complaints would be alleviated. The problem is that flies in the face of the Wendover corridor plan. I'm assuming that, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not saying we should do it. I'm assuming that we could condition the zoning on direct access to Wendover. I'll ask city staff, is that something this commission has the authority to do?
The applicant would have to agree to that condition. Now, the board could always note that that could be a recommendation for council to consider, but the applicant would have to agree to any additional changes to conditions.
Okay.
If I may just add, just to point out, there is a significant topographic issue there with the stream, the floodplains, and the topography, the steep slopes there. It's pretty difficult to get a crossing there, particularly if you're not going to have any yield of development on the south side there. So that's what, when staff was looking at that with the applicant, we didn't really feel like it was feasible to cross that stream. And that's why the development was not only on the northern portion, but was conditioned at a lower number of units. It's actually conditioned to about 10.5 units to the acre.
So we're basically left with, as far as ingress and egress, 500 feet on Morris Farm Road. That's pretty much where we are.
Yep. There's similar other multifamily developments that have that same type of scenario where they've got multiple points of access on Morris Farms Road because the topography, the surrounding development, that it is somewhat of a constraint in that area. It's not just Wendover Avenue. In this case, it's really more the stream and the topography that sort of bisect this tract of land.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got a comment on you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Uzak.
I agree with your original point. When I look at this, I think to myself, developing anything here looks really difficult. But I also think to myself, I'm not a developer. And I don't know that I should be substituting my judgment for the judgment of a developer who thinks she can develop something there and make it work and be financially viable and all that sort of stuff. I'm concerned about people walking in the street, but people are already walking in the street and they're going to walk in the street some more, I guess, because there's nothing else there they can do. So I'm not seeing a good reason in my own mind why I should vote against it.
Okay. Chair recognizes Commissioner Moore.
I was going to say that somewhat to that point, the neighborhood that's immediately behind the proposed site I'm pretty sure that also only has one in and out there. So, I mean, again, it's very similar, and it's not ideal. I mean, I've been in that, had
Right.
someone who lived in there. It's kind of janky. I mean, it really is. But it's worked for them. So this really it fits the same type of activity that's going on there outside of the increased
Well, but
volume.
at what point do you overload the system? I mean, by the system, I mean Morris Farm Road.
Yeah, no question. I guess the question that I'd have is, is that does that fall with this body, or does that fall back on the traffic side of the house?
Well, city transportation, as I recall, didn't really see that it would be a major problem. Mr. Venable can address that.
Sure. We did look at this, and as you see in your report, traffic impact analysis was not required. It is close, and just discussing this before and today also with our Director of Transportation, Mark McDonald, he felt, we could take a look at the signals out there, just keep an eye on those, make sure there's no huge impact to those. There can be adjustments made with those signals. And when Morris Farm was built, it functions as a collector street. Our standards today are as far as street widths are a lot narrower than when that was built. And that street is about 30 feet wide, which potentially could handle, and we can work with in TRC with the developer as far as any type of striping, potentially maybe a left turn lane out there at their access points. But that's something that can be worked, with the developer at TRC.
The traffic is cumulative. So although the street was built for a certain amount of traffic, was it built to accommodate? I mean, I realize that the traffic impact statement is not necessary for this development because of the number of cars from this development. When you add these to the others using it, where are we?
It can handle the traffic that the proposed traffic and the existing traffic currently.
Okay.
It was designed that way.
Any of the other commissioners have anything? Our chair recognizes Mr. Wheatley.
I've only been doing this, I think, a couple of years, I'm not sure, but it seems like most of the people that want to come and put housing on all these lots that are left, I mean, it's a little bit like the bottom of the barrel. And because it's so challenging, they're having to try to get more homes on less land because, if this was a field, we probably wouldn't be talking about it. But it seems to me like a lot of the cases that come through, and everybody sees it as, their apartment's going to be a lot of people, but, it's not much land to work with. And I think I agree with Mark. It doesn't look like a very good residential site. So I feel for the developers because they don't have a lot to choose from. And I think they have to fight for, to get stuff like this done.
Chair recognizes Mr. Walsh.
Didn't you, it was R16, didn't you say they were down to about 10 and a half units per acre? Or
It would be a density of approximately 10 units per acre based upon the 116 units they're considering.
Gotcha.
Chair recognizes Mr. Morgan.
Well, hearing all the comments and good comments related to what we're dealing with here, and it is going to be challenging. I think the developer, and rightfully so, we can only go vertical on this particular piece of property. So the density is going to go up in a small little area. We've offered 1 to 2 entrances, and by going vertical, you're actually are going to split the access out. The access out to Morris Farm is signaled on both ends. And we've already heard that it's already wide enough to handle the existing. So I think the impact is fairly minimal, but the land is going to be difficult to develop. So,
Well, the risk for the development and his future profit or loss is on the developer. We're not really here to protect the developer from a business risk. Anything else from the commissioners? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I have one other question.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Swift.
Transportation Department, on the backside over on Tarrant where Rocky Brook cuts through that other little neighborhood and comes out, there used to be, I'm assuming there's a gate. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was a gate. So it's this little road. If you look at on the the site, and then you see Rocky Brook Road, and it comes back, and there's just little houses, and there's sort of a circle, and there's a little exit that comes out on Tarrant Road.
I think that was maybe an emergency fire exit. I'm not sure. Is that what that?
You couldn't ever get in or out there because there was a gate. So I think you could go out. Is there any way to open that up so traffic can come in from Tarrant into that area?
Referring to the development that has a gate,
Yeah.
that is a private drive. It's not a public street.
Okay.
And with that being a private drive, they put in a gate. I believe that.
But it goes into this neighborhood.
I believe that is I forgot the name of that neighborhood. So not River Ridge.
Right here.
But
Private access to those condos or that development there that's not a public access.
You can't put a gate on a public road.
Right. Yeah, it's just a private.
yeah, that is a private drive,
Okay.
not a public street. And they put that in when they did that specific development. And the only reason that was allowed is because it was a private drive and not a public street.
Okay. I just didn't know if there was any way to get access where you could get some of that traffic going out that way.
Yeah, I've been informed the developer is with us this evening, would like to address us, and I'm sure they'll also be available for comments if any of the commissioners want to ask them directly. Is the applicant available at this moment?
Yes. Yes, this is Craig Stone with Winfield Properties. What questions can we help with?
Yes, sir. Do you have anything additional you'd like to offer us?
I think at this point, we're certainly cognizant of some of the feedback that we've heard and also some of the comments that have been made tonight. And we did seek initial interaction with transportation and had gotten feedback for that. I think going through this process, and we've gone through this process on 6 communities in the last number of years with the city, there are a number of checks and balances as you move through this process that allow the city, the TRC review, transportation, those kind of things. As we move through the process, the ability to be able to look at this, look at our plans, those types of things, and make comments and make conditions and requirements that we would have to meet. This certainly is, from a topography standpoint, a little bit of a challenging site to deal with, but it's something that, we in the past have dealt with and do continue to. There's not much new land being made that's flat. We certainly would appreciate having something like that, but this is a location that we chose that seemed to meet all of the longer range studies and longer range plans for the community and fit for this. We've reduced down the overall density for a number of different reasons that apply to this parcel as a whole. And so one thing that we would offer up in this is, we've worked with the city on a number of developments and always respect the conditions and the requirements that they put on us as developers for communities. And one thing that we're trying to do is develop a community that would be a long-term part of this community as well. And so for our prospective folks that we would be serving as residents, we're going to be looking out for them as well. They wouldn't want to live in the community if we didn't do the proper things as far as pedestrian and vehicle controls and those types of things. And so there is, through this process, there is a number of checks and balances that are outside of us that we don't have control on, that we have to adhere to. And there's quite a bit of regulation and guidance that the city, that being the fire department, and a number of different things that will put parameters around what we would do and ultimately what our plans would submit to the municipality as we go through it.
Very good, thank you. The commissioners have any other questions for the applicant? Any other comments? Anyone wish to offer a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve zoning map amendment 20-24 as presented.
Mr. Walsh has made a motion to approve as presented.
Mr. Usack seconds.
Uzak has seconded.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, is that with the amended conditions?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Does everyone understand the motion? Any questions? If not, I will ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to recommend approval of zoning map amendment 20-14 with the amended condition. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, this request by Winfield Properties, zoning amendment 20-24, has been favorably recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. A consistency statement in support of this recommendation is required for the record. Chair recognizes Mr. Juzak.
I move that the commission adopt a statement that zoning map amendment 20-24 is consistent with the city's adopted policy guidance because as conditioned, the requested RM16 district is supported by the relevant goals and objectives of the land use plan and the West Wendover Avenue / Guilford College Road corridor plan. Furthermore, the request is reasonable and in the public interest because this zoning map amendment proposes to establish similar zoning as exists on abutting land, which would enable a development pattern consistent with this portion of West Wendover Avenue corridor and along Moore's Farm Road.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Consistency statement has been moved by Mr. Uzak and has been seconded by Mr. Walsh. Does everyone understand the motion? I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to adopt the consistency statement as read by Mr. Uzak. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, the motion carries. A recommended statement of consistency has been adopted. Final public hearing on this item will be held before City Council on February 15th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 p.m. in these chambers. The next item on tonight's agenda is High Point University zoning map amendment 20-25. I'll start by asking, is the applicant present?
Good evening. Yes, Barry Kitley, High Point
Yes,
University.
sir. Mr. Kitley, do you have anything additional you wanted to add before the commissioners begin deliberations?
Thank you for the opportunity. I don't have anything to add.
Very well. The commissioners have any comments or questions on this particular request? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve zoning map amendment 20-25 as presented.
Commissioner Wheatley has moved a motion as presented to approve. Do we have a second? Commissioner Swift has seconded the motion. Does everyone understand the motion? Any questions? If not, I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to approve zoning map amendment 20-25 as presented by staff. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
By a vote of 8-0, this request by High Point University, zoning amendment -20-25 has been favorably recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We will need a consistency statement in support of this recommendation for the record.
I'll read that. I move that the commission adopt a statement that zoning map amendment 20-25 is consistent with the city's adopted policy guidance because the zoning site is designated as institutional by the land use plan and supported by policies of the core city plan. Furthermore, the request is reasonable in the public interest because the zoning request will incorporate the 2 remaining residentially zoned properties into the campus and create a uniform zoning district for all the land within this area.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Consistency statement has been moved by Mr. Venable and has been seconded by Mr. Wheatley. Any questions from the commissioners? Everyone understand the motion? I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to adopt the consistency statement for zoning map amendment 20-25 as read by Mr. Venable. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, the motion carries. A recommended statement of consistency has been adopted. Final public hearing on this item will be held before City Council on February 15th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 PM in these chambers. The next item to conclude on tonight's agenda is Curry Corporation zoning map amendment 20-26. I'll ask if the applicant is present this evening and if they have anything else they'd like to add.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. This is Mike Fox on behalf of the applicant. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we are here tonight and we do not have anything else to add, but are available for questions if anyone has any.
Very good. The commissioners have any questions for Mr. Fox? Any comments, any deliberation? I will entertain a motion.
This is Commissioner Walsh. I make a motion to approve zoning map amendment 20-26.
We have a second.
I'll second. Commissioner Moore.
Very well. So we have a motion to recommend approval as presented by staff. It's been moved by Mr. Walsh and seconded by Commissioner Moore. Unless there's any questions, I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to approve zoning map amendment 20-26 as recommended by staff. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
By a vote of 8-0, this request by Curry Corporation has been favorably recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We will need a consistency statement for this recommendation.
I move that the commission adopt the statement that the zoning map amendment 20-26 is consistent with the city's adopted policy guidance because as conditioned, the requested CZ LID district meets objectives of the community growth vision statement and the land use plan.
Very well, I'll second the motion. The consistency statement has been moved by Ms. Swift and seconded by myself, Mr. Kirkman. If there are no questions, I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Can I clarify that that was a completed consistency statement?
I don't think it was.
Yeah, you couldn't hear it.
Finished.
What's that?
She wasn't
I
finished.
wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He can't, we can.
I can't quite
He
hear.
can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a
Do you want me to
little
finish?
tough.
I
Yeah,
thought, man,
let's-
that was quick. He knew how to do that.
For the record, yeah, let's go through the whole thing.
Okay, so I'll pick up where I left off. Specifically protecting the appearance of the Gallimore Dairy Road corridor and allowing for continued restricted industrial development as designated. Furthermore, the request is reasonable and in the public interest because as conditioned to meet district standards of the EC zoning district, the requested CZLI district will be similar to and compatible with the previous CZLI zoning districts approved in this area.
That's it, correct? Okay. I will still second that motion. So if there are no questions, I'll ask the recording secretary to take the roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to adopt the consistency statement as read by Ms. Swift for zoning map amendment 20-26. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
By a vote of 8-0, the motion carries. A recommended statement of consistency has been adopted. Final public hearing on this item will be held before City Council on February 15th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 PM in these chambers. Final item on our agenda tonight, City of High Point street name change 20-01. I want to remind the commissioners that the Planning and Zoning Commission has the final say on street name changes, so there will be no secondary hearing before City Council. Whatever we decide tonight is it. Any questions, comments? I'm going to make a motion in that case to approve the request as presented by staff.
I'll second.
Very well. Mr. Wheatley has seconded my motion to approve as presented by staff. Unless there's any questions, I'll have the recording secretary take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to approve street name change 20-01 as presented by staff. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, this request by the city of High Point has been favorably recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Was this a straight up and down vote? We do need a consistency statement. We do not. Very well. Request is carried. And when does that become effective? Immediately. Very well. Unless there is anything else from the commissioners or city staff, anything from anybody, I will make a motion to adjourn until our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Second.
Is that Mr. Walsh or Mr. Morgan?
Me, second.
Swift has seconded the motion to adjourn. I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please answer yes or no in response to the motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Uzak.
Yes.
Mr. Kirkman.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Swift. Mr. Venable.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of the motion to adjourn.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, we are adjourned.